Hammer and anvil. One force fixes the enemy in place through frontal pressure, while a second, more mobile force strikes from the flank or rear. The anvil absorbs contact and prevents withdrawal, while the hammer delivers decisive force. This tactic succeeds when timing and coordination are perfect. If the enemy breaks through the anvil or escapes before the hammer arrives, the maneuver fails.
Shock and awe. The objective is psychological paralysis rather than gradual destruction. Massive, rapid strikes against command centers, infrastructure, and military assets overwhelm the enemy's ability to respond. The enemy collapses mentally before collapsing physically. If the enemy retains cohesion or adapts quickly, the effect diminishes.
Elastic defense. Defenders deliberately yield ground under pressure instead of holding rigid lines. The attacker advances and overextends, stretching supply lines in cohesion. Defenders then counterattack against weakened, isolated units. Discipline is critical. Without it, the withdrawal becomes a rout.
Line formation. Troops deploy shoulder to shoulder across a wide front, so the maximum number of weapons can fire simultaneously. This formation prioritizes firepower and control over speed. It demands discipline and spacing, because once a section collapses, the entire line risks being rolled up from the flank. It dominated warfare when weapons were slow to reload, and accuracy depended on massed volleys.
Human wave attack. Large numbers of infantry assault defensive positions in successive waves. The intent is to exhaust defenders, overwhelm limited ammunition, and exploit any breach through sheer persistence. It accepts high casualties as a cost of progress. This tactic relies on morale, numbers, and political tolerance for losses.
Guerrilla warfare. Combat is decentralized and continuous rather than decisive. Small units blend into terrain or population, striking when advantage is absolute. Logistics, morale, and time are targeted instead of enemy formations. The goal is to make occupation or control too costly to sustain.
Hit and run. Forces strike quickly at exposed targets and disengage before the enemy can respond effectively. Success depends on speed, intelligence, and safe withdrawal routes. Repeated attacks create constant pressure, forcing the enemy into a defensive posture and eroding confidence.
Night assault. Attacks are launched under darkness to reduce enemies' situational awareness and coordination. Training and navigation are more important than firepower. The tactic exploits fear and confusion, but risks friendly fire and disorganization if discipline breaks down.
Deception operations. False signals, fake units, and misleading information manipulate enemy perceptions. The goal is to force the enemy to react incorrectly, reinforcing the wrong position or attacking at the wrong time. Effective deception shapes the battlefield before combat begins. Canalization. Terrain, obstacles, or controlled destruction are used to force the enemy into narrow approaches. Movement becomes predictable and vulnerable to concentrated fire. This tactic amplifies defensive power and limits numerical advantage.
Suppression. Continuous fire denies the enemy freedom of movement, observation, and communication. The objective is control, not destruction. Suppression allows friendly units to maneuver while the enemy remains pinned and disoriented.
Breakthrough exploitation. After breaching enemy defenses, mobile forces push rapidly into the rear areas. Supply lines, command nodes, and reserves are targeted to prevent recovery. Without exploitation, a breakthrough becomes only a temporary success. Strategic withdrawal. Forces retreat deliberately to preserve combat power or draw the enemy into disadvantageous terrain. Space is exchanged for time, logistics, or attrition. This tactic requires discipline to avoid collapse and clear communication to maintain morale.
Vertical envelopment. Forces attack from above or behind using airborne or elevated insertion. Defenses are bypassed rather than confronted. Surprise and speed define success, but reliance on air superiority makes it vulnerable.
Raiding warfare. Raiding consists of fast, limited attacks designed to damage enemy capabilities without holding territory. Targets are carefully selected for high impact and low risk, such as supply depots, communication nodes, or isolated units. Raids force the enemy to divert manpower to security duties, stretching their forces thin and slowing operations. The cumulative effect of repeated raids can be more damaging than a single major battle. Attrition warfare. Attrition warfare seeks victory by exhausting the enemy's ability to continue fighting. Losses in manpower, equipment, and morale are inflicted steadily rather than decisively. Battles are chosen based on sustainability, not speed. This strategy favors the side with superior industry, logistics, and political tolerance for prolonged conflict.
Blockade. Blockades isolate the enemy by cutting off supplies, trade, and reinforcements. It weakens both military operations and civilian infrastructure over time. Blockades can be naval, land-based, or economic. Their success depends on enforcement strength and the enemy's ability to bypass restrictions.
Counteroffensive. A counteroffensive is launched after absorbing or blunting an enemy attack. Defensive forces identify overextended or exhausted units and strike them at their weakest point. Timing and intelligence determine success. A well-executed counteroffensive can reverse battlefield momentum and collapse an attacking force.
Penetration and isolation. This tactic focuses on breaking through enemy lines at specific points rather than across the entire front. Once penetration occurs, mobile forces move quickly to isolate sections of the enemy. Isolated units are deprived of coordination, supplies, and reinforcement, allowing them to be defeated individually.
Urban encirclement. Urban encirclement surrounds a city to cut off supply routes, reinforcements, and civilian movement. The objective is to force surrender without costly street-by-street combat. Pressure is applied through time, scarcity, and psychological strain, rather than direct assault. Psychological warfare. Psychological warfare targets morale, perception, and decision-making. Fear, misinformation, and uncertainty are deliberately amplified. The goal is to weaken resistance before or during combat, making physical victory easier or unnecessary.
Decapitation strikes. Decapitation strikes target leadership, command structures, or communication hubs to disrupt control and coordination. By removing decision-makers, the enemy's ability to respond effectively is reduced. Success depends on accurate intelligence and rapid follow-up operations.
Area denial. Area denial prevents or restricts enemy movement through specific terrain. Mines, obstacles, fire zones, or persistent threats make areas too dangerous to traverse. This tactic shapes the battlefield indirectly by forcing the enemy to reroute or delay operations.
Counterinsurgency. Counterinsurgency focuses on separating insurgent forces from civilian support. Military action is combined with intelligence, security, and governance measures. Success is measured by stability rather than battlefield victories. Mobile defense. Mobile defense avoids static positions in favor of constant movement and flexible response. Defensive units reposition to absorb attacks, counterstrike, and avoid encirclement. This tactic relies on speed and situational awareness.